fearless leader. We're going to be talking about KPI mastery today, but in a little bit of a different perspective. So, and you'll see we geek out on this stuff. We love it. So cool. And for those of you that are on the BPA already, you're going to see we're live streaming this on our BPA platform. We're just bringing a whole bunch of cool new stuff to you along the way. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So cool. All right. Any other announcements before we get rolling here?
I don't think so. Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. Let me pull up my slides here. And if you don't know this already, I'm one of the most technically challenged human beings there is. And let me pull this up here.
So we will be fielding questions. You can put them in the chat there, and we'll get to as many as we can throughout the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. And so today we're going to be talking about KPI mastery, part of our webinar series. And we're going to be giving you a framework. And I promise you, if you follow this framework, you're going to see we're going to make some pretty big promises in here. Barrett's going to give us a big picture, but if you follow this process, no matter who you are, if you're involved in the leadership aspect of a dental practice, it works. It's actually wildly predictable. And we'll explain a little bit more about that as we go. A couple show notes or a couple program notes. We always say this, our To the Top Study Club is growing like crazy. And what it is it's our think tank. It's our own mastermind, our own private study club. We currently have 2 clubs of almost 50 in each one of them running concurrently in the Milwaukee office. And it's so good that if you haven't been, you need to come. And so we have what's called the golden ticket where you can try for free. And if you don't love it, you don't have to stay. Our next one is going to be towards the end of January. So if you're interested, you can contact Gina on our team and she'll arrange the whole thing. You can come, hang out, learn from everybody else in the room. And if you don't like it, you don't have to stay. That's how much we believe in it. We know that won't happen. So be our guest. Join us. And then also, as we're adding more value to the BPA, many of you are already back there. So if you're already back there, you know this is how it's working. There's 3 levels to our BPA, which is the Best Practices Association online platform. You can do it on your own. You're going to see we have tons of resources, hundreds of videos, some of the best master classes from some of the greatest speakers. They're all back there for you to consume asynchronously on your own. You can also ask questions. And so it's a great place to feel supported. If you don't want to do it on your own, you can do it in a group, which is our To the Top Study Club. Being a dentist is lonely. We never want you to do that. And the group will challenge you to think bigger and better and be a better leader quarter over quarter. And that's our To the Top Study Club. And the 3rd level of the BPA is pro coaching. If you've tried everything, you're like, I've tried this, I've tried that, I've had I've tried, and you just want somebody to help you do it, that's what we do. We hold you accountable to making sure you get these things done so that you can focus on your team and your patients and your family, and you can see progress quarter over quarter. So that's a little bit about what we do, and you're welcome to join us at any point. And we're going to be adding this resource as well as many others back there. We'll have our own custom app soon. It's almost to the finish line in Apple or Google, and you'll see it'll just have a whole bunch of new features on there. So that's coming soon. And that means you can take it on the go wherever you go. So awesome. So let's jump into it. Today we're going to be talking about KPI mastery and driving dental practice success with data. And Barrett, I want you to give everybody on here the big picture. What's the big picture we're going to be talking about?
Yeah. The big picture is this, and those of you on here can attest to this. Every other quote unquote KPI lecture you've been to historically has been going through a bunch of numbers, identifying the benchmark nationally, and then showing where you line up. And then you feel the anxiety to make your number match the KPI. And what's missing in that strategy is the why. Why does any KPI need to be improved? What will it eventually do for your practice? And so we're going to present some of the key KPIs, or the biggest KPIs you need to know to understand the performance of your practice. And then once you have and identify gaps in that story, that's when some of these supporting KPIs, the ones you're used to looking at in a KPI webinar in the past, that's when those really make sense. And so really, we always want to track numbers, but we want to put our efforts towards improving the KPIs that will give us the results we want, versus putting time, money, effort towards improving numbers and having the same financial results and practice performance at the end. So we're going to present the key KPIs that you have to start with, and you'll see how once you understand the financial gap picture, the supporting KPIs really play an important role.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. And Barrett's going to present the big picture. I'm going to make the big promise. Now, you guys are going to, this is why I want you to listen to this. And I want you to share this with, almost everybody on your team that would help you make decisions at this level. Because if you do this, it's actually, like I said earlier, it's wildly predictable. So here's my promise to you. You listen to this webinar, you do it. You can do this over, let's present this over 4 years. Over 4 years, I'm going to make a promise to you. I'm going to show you a way where you can work 2 less months per year. We're going to go from 18.3 days a month, which is what the average dentist in the United States does, down to 15 days a month, and you're going to do better. The second thing is, we're not going to just go crazy with your gross production. Let's grow your gross production, but let's do it reasonably, and let's do it in less than 10%, okay? We're also going to show you how to become less PPO dependent. Doesn't mean you need to get off of them, but let's become less dependent on PPOs over time. And let me just say this. The allowable fee that you're paying right now is going to go away in most PPOs, meaning you have a higher status in a PPO, and they're going to change the rules over time where the allowable isn't going to be what you think it is, which is going to put a pinch on things. So we're going to teach you how to do it on your own. Another promise I'm going to show you in that same respect is how to cut our write-offs in half. We're actually going to cut them right in half from $435,000 to $216,000. Now, you're already calling me a liar, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to make good on this. And we're in the same vein of not improving your collections or your production very much, less than 10%. We're going to improve your collections by $383,000. Another promise I'm going to make good on by the end of this webinar is I'm going to show you how to spend more money in your overhead. Your actual overhead dollars are going to go up by $100,000 over 4 years, where you could actually pay your team members more. You could make investments in some of those things. Instead of going cheap, you're going to make good investments, and you're going to do it in a tax deductible way. And let's make another promise. Let's just go there. Your P&L is going to go from $235,000 at the bottom to $514,000, where your dental CPA is going to go, what in the world is going on? It's doubled in 4 years. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. And then we're also going to double your take-home pay, which is not on your P&L. We're going to take it from $120,000 that's real cash that you put in your own personal account. We're going to double that over 4 years. And we're going to 10x what you normally would have left in your bank account. So at the end of the year, you probably have $9,000 left in your account after you pay taxes, your debt, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to actually 10x that. So I know you're thinking I'm a liar, but let's do it. Let's go right there. And before we do that, I'm going to show you why having a defined direction, the direction that Barrett just shared, is so important. Because like Barrett shared, people are chasing these numbers. They're chasing these false proxies. Here's a false proxy. I'm going to grow production. That's a false proxy. I'm going to speak to the Chapel Hill dental students tomorrow actually, 82 of them. And I'm going to share with them that being paid on collections is a false proxy. You have no idea what the practice is going to collect, especially if it's writing off 33%. Let's get there. We'll get there in a second. So we're going to define the direction in KPIs and why this is so important. Because running a dental practice, it comes with countless moving parts. And you have to have clear insight so that you feel confident about what you're building. That's one of my questions today. What are you building? And make sure everybody's aligned so we can move forward on that. And these key performance indicators that we're going to share with you today, they're straightforward. They're easy. You can gain clarity. You know how you're doing in 1 second when you look at this. You also are able to come up with countermeasures pretty quickly when you know what these numbers are. And by understanding these benchmarks, you can feel really confident about what you're building so that when the world is getting crazy around you, like a large DSO builds a 22 operatory down the street, you can go knock yourself out. I know what I'm building, and we're on track with that. And why data is so important is because it tells the true story about your practice health. Some dentists, even some of the dentists we coach, they don't want to look at the data, but the data doesn't lie. It tells the whole story about your practice. And without data, you're just, you're making decisions anecdotally, and you're doing it off of feelings. And I'm the worst person that should ever make decisions off of feelings, because when I get a feeling about something, it's a pretty strong one. So we don't want you to do that. And when you know your data, your emotions can take a back seat. You can actually calm yourself. You actually look like a calm person when you have healthy data and you know the decisions that you're making and you know how they positively impact your practice and the future. And so let's break this down into the essential targets that every practice should know. And so I already shared this one, but here's the first one. And Barrett, I want you to speak on this one. It's not about gross production, all that stuff. It's not about how you produce per hour. The number one KPI is days worked per month. You can even extrapolate that to days worked per year. I'm shocked by the number of dentists that I ask that don't know that number. I ask them, how many days did you work? I don't know. It's a lot. And it keeps climbing. According to the ADA, the average dentist works 220 days a year. And that is up from the previous time that they measured that. I'm going to say this, time is the new rich. I don't care how much money you make. I think the people that have the ability to control their time are the wealthiest people in the world. So by definition, how many days per month is your practice open? Okay. And that is unique to your vision. And so the average practice is open, like we shared, 16 to 22 days per month or 200 to 250 days a year. I just found a dentist this week. I think it was 240 days a year. That's a lot. It's crazy. And why is this so important? Because for your practice, financial planning, resource management, appointment availability, scheduling, and for your life, personal planning, like reduce stress, enhance, working more doesn't make it better. So Barrett, what are your thoughts on days work per month or year?
Yeah. I mean, you see we're drawing the first equation, which is days worked times production per day equals your gross production. So historically, we always start with gross production. I produced X amount this month, and I produced X amount last month, and I'm going to produce X amount next month. But what's missing from that is how many days. So we've all had this happen where we usually do 100 grand a month, for just throwing out numbers. And then 1 month we do 72. And then we get upset and we look for ways to quote unquote do more. We don't always say, yeah, but we worked 8 less days. So it's in that regard, it's not a production problem. It's just you worked less days and you have to be okay with that. So gross production by itself is often the worst KPI unless you pair it with how many days did I work times how much production do we do each day that office is open. That tells the story of your gross production.
Yeah. And conversely, this is the default one to make things better. Production isn't going the way it needs to go. We produce $7,000. We just add more days. We're going to add more days until we financially make this formula work. So we're going to reverse engineer this. I mean, I think you have to be extremely intentional about days worked per month and work fewer days, but be more efficient. And we'll show you exactly how to do that. And so days worked is an important thing. Gross production, and we've shared this many times, probably the most useless of all the numbers, but it's still important. It's by definition the dollar amount of the procedures that you complete in your practice. And it can vary widely depending on several factors, including the practice location, size, specialty, patient demographic, fees, all that kind of stuff. And why is this important? Because high gross production directly correlates to increased revenue in most cases, most every case. Providing financial, you can feel the activity and you can see the result in most cases, allowing you to focus on what you can do specifically by delivering quality care and relieving some of the financial concerns and stress that you have. Increased gross production allows practices to invest in better tools, technologies, staff training, ultimately enhance patient care, and it becomes the barometer by how you compare yourself to all other dentists and all the other dental practices. Like, how much did you produce? How much did you produce? So it's an important one, but you have to be careful that it doesn't become this false proxy.
Yeah, let me interject real quick
Please.
there, Kirk. So here's how I want everyone to look at gross production. Gross production is the output of your practice. And you can see gross production is great, but it's not as beneficial or not as useful until we know how much of that are we actually going to collect. And when we collect most of that, meaning our profit margin is intact and we do more production, we know that our profitability, our revenue, our ability to invest that money goes up. But when we only know our gross production and we don't have a good handle on how much of that we actually get to collect, doing more gross production sometimes is actually harmful. It's simply the output. And I'll also say that not most dentists don't accurately know their true gross production because they're billing out PPO codes differently, not the full fee. And we'll get into that. But basically, what I want you to understand right now is gross production is only 1 point. And unless we know how much production per day, now we can tell a little bit more of the story. And then once we know our write-offs and how much of that we actually collect, now gross production, we can start to see the whole picture. I do $1 million and I collect $1 million is different than I do $1 million and I only collect 600,000. And so that's the story we need to tell versus just, boy, we didn't produce enough, let's do more. That may be the solution, but we need to know more of the story.
100%. So it's important to know that. And now, as we start to move down that chart, the write-off percentage is another KPI that you have to know. And by definition, it's the difference between the fee for a dental procedure and the amount actually charged. Essentially, it represents the amount of revenue that the practice forgoes. And again, there's inherent challenges in write-off percentages. In a fee-for-service practice, you're going to find it anywhere between 3 and 10% because you're going to have, elective write-offs, things that you want to do. While a PPO practice can range anywhere between 25 and 35%, and now we're seeing practices in the upper 40th percentiles. We've even seen a few in the 50th percentiles, which is crazy, and it keeps climbing. And so why is this important? Because tracking and managing write-offs is essential for maintaining profitability and sustainability. You have to. And writing off 35% or more of your gross production means that a significant portion of your hard work and time is essentially uncompensated, meaning almost you're working 1 out of every 3 days for free, and you're working hard for that. And so it is what it is. Now we've just got to, relieve some of the pressure and the gap in there. This not only erodes your income, but it also leads to longer hours, increased stress, and your attempt to make up for the lost revenue. It's just a very large hole in the bathtub, and your only goal is to put more water in there. So write-offs are really important. And in this case scenario, as you can see on the screen, this isn't unusual. This is pretty typical for a young dentist that we would coach working 220 days a year. Gross production is $6,000 per day. So their gross production per year is $1.3 million. And then writing off 33%, and that dollar amount means it's $435,000. Now, the next one leads us to net production. So that would be the natural progression on KPIs because by definition, it's the dollar amount of production after adjustments are made. This is basically your collectible production. The benchmark for this is just like gross production. This could vary widely depending on several factors, including the practice location, size, specialty, involvement in insurance, all that kind of stuff. So the variable here is your write-offs. So a fee-for-service practice may aim for 95% of their gross production is their net production, and a PPO practice may aim for 70% of their gross production is their net production. Why is this important? Because regularly monitoring the net production allows you to see how write-offs and adjustments are truly affecting your income. It's money that you can't even collect, but you're equipping your team to support. I don't know how to say that better, but really when a gross production and a net production are pretty close to each other, let's say there's a practice that does 1.3 in gross production and net production 1.3, they're collecting all of it, meaning they probably have 8 team members. But a practice that doesn't collect all of it, they might have 12 team members or 10 team members for that amount of activity. Net production provides a clearer picture of what your actual revenue potential is. So anything you would add about this, Barrett?
Yeah, I just want us to step back and think about KPIs. Again, we've talked about office days open, gross production per day, gross production and write-offs, and then leaving with net production or your maximum collectible amount. I'm thinking back to earlier in my career, some of my KPI scorecards and things that I pulled out, and it was filled with gross production, percent of that which was hygiene, percent of that which was doctor, fluoride applications, units of crown, diagnosed work, accepted work, perio percentage, new patient reappointment fee, utilization percentage fee. All of that's important. But does it make sense to look and dig into that and improve that without knowing these key metrics, gross production per day, write-offs? If we don't know our write-off percentage, we can do as many fluoride applications and units of crowns and diagnosed work, and we can improve all those KPIs and still wonder why the profit at the end of the P&L statement isn't going up. And so my point is that we got to back up and say there is this bigger picture with some very important KPIs that until we know these and how they work, going into the nitty-gritty without knowing doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, once we say, I know the story, and one of my solutions is to increase the production per day because I'm going to work less days. Now, how do you do that? Great. We've got to increase hygiene production. We've got to increase diagnosed work. We've got to go improve those metrics, but we know the outcome. And so if you just think back to all of our experiences, and I'm the same because I was for 20 years, looking at KPIs, I improved numbers without knowing why.
Right.
And what actually improving the new patient reappointment rate, for example, which is a hugely important number. But what does that actually do for the performance of my practice? This is where these key gaps, these key targets, these key metrics that we're working you through, until you know these and track these and get it, going deeper into those supporting KPIs, you'll be less effective.
Yeah, totally. And I have to say this clearly because I get this feedback. I get this feedback several times a week. You guys are the people that help people get off of PPOs completely and out of network. That is not true. We do help people, a lot of them do that, but they choose that journey. Our goal is to help you practice the way you want to practice. There are practices that we coach, they never want to get off PPOs, but they want to become less PPO dependent. That's our journey. Our job is to help you become smarter, whatever that means to you. So please don't hear that we want you to get off PPOs. It's dangerous just to do that emotionally. But what I do want you to see, and Andy, can you show that description on the screen here, is this is what I want you to understand more than anything. People say, I have a $1.3 million practice. The truth of it is, in this example, no, you don't. You don't have a $1.3 million practice. You have an $884,000 practice. That's a different thing because you're writing off 33%. The write-offs matter because it tells us so much about the practice, and that is important to know. Now, another thing you have
and that's quick, Kirk. That's why we call that the effort gap, because that practice is looking at those numbers and saying, man, we work way too hard
right
to have a maximum collectible amount of $884,000. Where is it all going?
Yeah. And the
And
effort,
that's the anxiety. That's that visceral reaction that once you know these numbers helps you actually make really strategic decisions about the future of your practice.
yeah, now I'm not a conspiracy theorist, or maybe I am. I don't care. It doesn't matter anymore. I love this stuff and I love dentistry and I love the people we coach. But here's the challenge. Your effort gap is going to get harder and harder and harder. The insurance game, by definition, is just extremely complex. You'd be amazed by how many smart dentists we ask to pull information on all these PPOs and they can't find it. It's hard to find. It's hard to dig. Where do I find this? And then they start auditing EOBs and they go, I don't participate with that insurance. Well, with the complexity involved with third party and TPAs, they're like, I don't know how this happened. So you do have to chart your own course and you have to know these numbers. And by definition, knowing these numbers, it's going to ask you to do a deeper dive on them. So if you feel tired, look at your effort gap. Now, the next one is collections percentage. This is an important one and an easy one to fix. By definition, it's the amount of money that a dental practice actually receives from its services in relation to net production. The benchmark is 100%. It should always be 100%. In a lot of cases, we coach practices, it's 104% or 106% because they're collecting on money they should have been collecting last year and the year before. Why is this important? Because a collection rate of 100% reflects effective billing and payment process. It's consistent monitoring that helps us identify this. And really the big issue is this. If a practice has a collection rate of 95%, you're leaving 5% on the table. Like that's a lot of money. And I'll tell you why you do it. Because you're a nice person. And you have Susie up the front, and she's been there for 10 years, and you don't want to upset Susie. And Susie could benefit so much from some great support or some great development and learn how to do this because you teach people how to treat you with how they pay. So I know, Barrett, this is a big one for you, but anything you would add about collections percentage?
Well, lack of collections or not, anything under that 100% is what we say the silent killer of profit. So the money's spent, the output has already happened, right? You paid people the hourly wage, you used the gloves, you used the mask, you used the materials, it's already gone. And so not collecting it really simply comes out of the profit. So it's a silent killer. It's often the first place when we do gaps, we're like, we got to get that to 100 because that goes right to the bottom line. Now, I just want to also point out, and if you're here and you're watching and you're a dentist and you're an associate, go in the chat and give us a little thumbs up or say, hey, I want to know how many associates, because you could watch this and say, well, this is only for practice owners. But like Kirk indicated, we're going to make the case that this might be as important, these metrics, these key KPIs for associates to understand, because every associate contract you sign depends on production, collection, write-offs, collection rates, and how you get paid. Secondly, talk about building your own value when you can bring some of these concepts back to your practice and make them more profitable by indicating. So this is not, it's certainly important for the business owner and the leadership team. And as you will see, very important for an associate to understand as they're looking at their job opportunities.
Yeah, so well said, buddy. So in this example, again, we're going to continue to illustrate this. The net collections is 95%, which means you're leaving 5% on the table. So there's a collections gap of that. And we're going to show you how to make that better as we continue. So the next KPI that's important is your overhead. Now, I see overhead differently than probably most everybody, and Barrett does too. And so we're going to explain that. Overhead is the deductible costs of running your business. They're legitimate costs that you use in the accounting process. If it's not on your profit and loss statement, it's not part of your overhead. We need to evaluate your overhead before any doctor is paid. You got to leave the doctor out of it because doctors are very unpredictable. So we need as much predictability within the profit and loss statement as possible. And why is this important? Because overhead is another gap where dollars are leaving the practice and doctors are paid after the overhead is paid. And you know this, if you don't have any money, it works for you if you're a solo dentist, whether you have 4 associates or you're just by yourself. When it snows and you don't collect enough, you got to pay all your bills and the doctor doesn't get paid. So the same thing applies whether you have one doctor or 10 doctors. Overhead is an indication of how lean you are operating in your business. And the other thing I would say, and Barrett, I want you to talk about overhead, your business is going to eat everything you leave in there. So you have to control the appetite of your business, and it's got to be a healthy range. But it's really more of a function of what you collect and how you monitor it. But Barrett, what else would you add about overhead?
Well, this is I'll lay on to the story of understanding this story of these numbers before we dig in and freak out about the supporting KPI. So again, I'll just use my own mistakes as evidence. So back in the day, I would do my overhead. I would see that I'm spending 7% on supplies and the benchmark says 5, and I'd go nuts cutting costs. Or I would buy cheaper pens, or I'd, buy cheaper printer paper to get the administrative costs down. But I didn't know why my overhead was high. And some of you out there have too high overheads. And some of you, it is because you're spending too much and you need to get leaner. But most people we coach that have high overheads into the 80s and 70s, it's usually not because you're spending too much. It's usually because your effort gap or your write-offs are too big and your collection gaps are too big or you're not collecting 100. And what those two do is it throws your profit margin out of whack. Because remember, overhead, you spend your overhead to produce your gross production. You calculate that percentage of overhead against your collections. So the further apart your gross production and your collections are, meaning your profit margin is minimal, your overhead's always going to be high. So and I'm painting this picture of, you can imagine yourself, and some of you are sitting and like, oh my God, I'm doing this right now, and I'm not sure if I need to be buying cheaper pens and laying off people and worrying about that, because I really don't know. Is my overhead high because I'm spending too much, or is it just that my effort gap and collections gap? So again, if instead of going in and saying, boy, I'm paying my people 32% and they say it should be 25 and freaking out to figure out how to fix that, let's first back up and say my overhead is 75. It should be more towards 60. Why is it 15 percentage points higher? Fill out your gaps. Then you can decide how to fix it. And part of it might be going in and spending less, but only if you know that's the real reason.
Totally agree. You got to get the story right. And so I don't know if you agree with this, Barrett, but the two most talked about numbers for the last 30 years have been what'd you produce and what's your overhead. People always say, what's your overhead? My overhead is, 58%. My overhead's 62%. Well, your overhead should be 55%. I get that, but that doesn't tell me, your overhead doesn't tell me a whole lot. I need to know the rest of the story. And by definition, just like Barrett said, if you have a lot of PPOs, your overhead's going to be high unless you've really worked the volume aspect of it. So you have to find out what the rest of the story is beyond the overhead, because the challenge I'm going to make, or the promise I'm going to make, is you can actually spend more money and your overhead percentage will go down. I'm going to show you how exactly that works here in just a second. What happens after your overhead is this. You have your gross profit. Simply put, it's total revenue minus your expenses, which is your overhead, is going to be your gross profit. This is what's going to show up on your profit and loss statement in most cases. And so why is this important? Because I have net profit and there should be gross profit. It gives you a clear picture of your financial health. Really, we can determine that. Now, what we're going to see beyond that are going to be decisions that you make that are separate from the practice. And I'll explain here in a second. This gives us clarity on how you focus the vision for the future with your practice. And when you know your financial status, you can plan for time off, you can pursue personal pursuits. You know that the practice is financially stable. So having a gross profit that continues to grow is critically important. And in this scenario, you can see here on the screen, gross profit for this dentist that produces 1.3 is $235,000. And most dental CPAs would tell you, you're doing awesome. And you're thinking, if this is you, I get it, but where's my money? I don't know where it all went. And so that leads
Hold
us.
on, Kirk. Go
Yeah,
back.
go
Go
ahead.
back to that slide once. Go back to that slide. I want to paint a picture here. Okay. I'm a single doc. I'm producing 1.3. I'm thinking I gotta be making pretty good money on producing 1.3. I should be making 4, 5, 600,000. But after I run the gaps, before I even pay myself a cent, there's only 235,000 left. So how do I make 400 if there's only 235,000 after all my mandated overhead expenses are paid? I haven't paid myself yet. So you can see a lot of people pay themselves. They don't understand this. And if you pay yourself, that's when you get these negative numbers and you get into this tax snowball and bad stuff happens and you chase production. So you can start to see why these numbers that you're looking on, these are the most important KPIs that you should be tracking. Before you track fluoride varnish applications, you got to understand these, because if you want to pay yourself 400 grand, but there's only 235 left, you can see the math doesn't work. And when math doesn't work, all that emotion of overhead, all that emotion goes away. And we get clear on what needs to happen so that if I want to pay myself 400, that gross profit has to be 400. Actually, it has to be more, because we'll show you why in a minute.
Yeah.
But again, I'm just always going to paint this picture of don't go down to the weeds unless you understand the blueprint of what you're supposed to be looking at.
Yeah. And if you stay on this hamster wheel, tell me if you agree with this, Barrett, you're going to feel tired. You're going to feel trapped. You're going to feel entitled to more money. You're going to feel entitled because you have little kids that I need to take them on a cruise. You're going to feel like I have to get away, and you're going to feel trapped. And when you feel trapped, you look for compensation. You look for a way out. And one of the way outs, if you go to your Facebook group or you listen to a lot of podcasts, is just scale. So I'm stuck at this whole 1.3 million. I don't have any money. I need more producers. I'm going to add some ops. I'm going to take on some debt. And hopefully by adding 6 more ops, another doctor, getting a partner, I can take some time off. I can make some money and I can relieve myself. Now, that can happen for a few people if they have a really great plan. But sometimes, most times, people go into it without a plan, and their only plan is to get out of where they're at. So they're chasing this, I gotta relieve the pressure I feel. And what we want you to do here is to know your numbers so that you can intelligently make those things. Because if you don't, what happens is you add the 6 ops, and now the facility becomes your philosophy. You don't really care about your philosophy of dentistry. Now it's all about a facility and how chairs have to be full and a number that's got to be reached. And that's not fun. And when you get there, you realize it's not the Valhalla I thought it would be. But really what you have to do after all these are done is you got to measure what your true profit is. And your true profit, by definition, small business owners know that the net profit is at the bottom of your P&L, but it's gross profit. And it's not really what goes into their bank accounts. Let me explain. Gross profit minus your DDS salaries, minus your taxes, because your debt and your taxes, you have a $5,000 a month payment for the equipment that you've purchased, but it doesn't show up on your P&L. You pay taxes, but it doesn't show up on your P&L. And you take distributions. You're like, I just need some cash. That's what's left is your true profit. It can't be found on your P&L. And why is this important? Because when you take that money, because I did it, you start to get into a dangerous place where you pay loan premiums and you're using profit to pay them. And if you don't do them quarterly, you start getting into trouble with the snowball. And I was in the snowball many years ago where I got these big tax bills, and my accountant, who knew supposedly a lot, said, we need to get caught up on taxes. And I'm like, what? So I was using this year's money to pay last year's taxes, and that's very expensive money. Anything you would say about true profit, Barrett?
Yeah, if you think about what I just talked about, we're working from $1 of production and saying money goes out in the effort gap, what's left? Money goes out in collections gap, what's left? Money goes out in the overhead gap, what's left? In this case, we're saying there's 235,000 left. Okay, but I don't get all that because I have taxes, and I have this cash flow gap. I have $60,000 a year of loan premium. So this is confusing if this is new to you, but the IRS has said that loan premiums, for instance, are not a deductible business expense. So when you pay a loan, you can deduct the interest, but not the premium. So that $5,000 a month that you're paying for the CBCT, that you're paying with profit, which is fine. You just need to know that why you're not making as much as you thought. Part of it is $5,000 a month of your profit is going towards that. You're paying tax. Guess what you're paying taxes on? You're paying taxes on the 235. And all of the rest is coming out. And you, in this case, there's only a true profit of $9,000, but the doctor's thinking he's going to pay himself 400. He's only paying himself 120, and he's got nothing left because of all this other stuff. So if you only take money through W-2, meaning it's on your P&L, you withhold taxes, you never take a distribution, or you never pay quarterly taxes. If you're an LLC, it might be that simple. But if anyone out there pays a loan through their company, they write a company check for it, you have a cash flow gap. If anyone takes a distribution, you have a cash flow gap. If anyone is paying quarterly estimated taxes, you likely have a cash flow gap, and you have to correlate that. And if you have a cash flow gap and you're not, you're like, I think I should be paying quarterly estimated. If you're not, you're going to have a tax snowball day, like Kirk just estimated. So this is confusing stuff. I don't want you to totally understand it, other than to just grasp the fact that the P&L, at the end of the P&L, the gross profit, before I even get to pay myself, is 235. Now I pay myself 120. Whatever the difference of that is what you get taxed on. But now I got to pay that loan, $60,000. So $60,000 of that loan is actually profit. So there's a lot of intricacies in there. It's a lot of complexity. All I want you to understand is grasp the fact that you have money leaving your practice that you're not seeing on the profit and loss statement. We call it below the line. And if you're the practice owner, you should be having a very clear conversation with your CPA about those expenditures, so that you never get into the day where both Kirk and I got into in our careers, which was a tax snowball day.
Yeah. And I was just going to say what you said so well is like, here's my point. If you're a dentist watching this, you need to lead the conversation. You can't ask an accountant, how am I doing? Like, because your accountant doesn't know the rest of the story. You have to say, this is where I want to go. And your accountant has to be working at least 6 months in front of you. Don't have them working behind you. So it's important. I love great accountants, but you have to lead the story. And so the last one is a practice health score, because I don't want to do all this and leave this out. I think the single most important thing you ever do is create an amazing team. And so we put this in here, and I don't want to say it's last. I would actually put it up there as almost first, but I want to make sure that you're setting your sights on, like, what metrics do we need to improve? Now, I'll tell you how this works for us. We use a health score for our company too. It's the number one driving metric that we want to know from our team every quarter, because it tells us from our team, based on what we think is important, on where we should put our emphasis as a leadership team, and we want you to do the same thing. And by definition, the Practice Health Score, it's a collaborative assessment by your team that evaluates the alignment, the efficiency, and overall health of the practice, which includes the practice culture. One of the questions that we have on ours is, how likely are you to refer this business that we work in to a friend? And that's the most important one. I want that at a 10. If you're getting an 8 from your team members, you need to know why and set a goal to get it to a 10. This score reflects how well your team works together, because when they work together, you see things you could never predict. And it measures key areas like communication, patient experience, operational efficiency, financial performance. The benchmark, the highest score achievable, is a 10. Now, I don't think you should ever get a 10. I think you should always be working and challenging something. The healthiest teams that we see have 8.0 or higher. And why is this important? Because the Practice Health Score fosters a culture of collaboration. You actually have listed on there of all the things that are important to us. This is what we want to get better at. And it creates numbers, accountability to give me feedback and the rest of the team on how we're doing. And it shows a commitment to making sure that we're making these things better. For dentists and practice leaders, the Practice Health Score provides critical insights, on how you're doing as a practice, how healthy this organization is, and how resilient it can be as you start to grow and embrace challenges. And so if you want a copy of this, you can email us at info@actdental. We're happy to send you a copy. I'm not going to go into actually what the questions are, but you should have some type of a survey that brings us all together and asks the question, how healthy is this place to work? So, Barrett, any other thoughts before we bring this to a close and make good on all these promises?
No, you're going to close it out with a really good case study, and I love that. And I'll just close out my portion of saying I believe very passionately about what we do, so I can say this strongly. If you're watching this, you're like, this is pretty cool. I would like to know this. What you're seeing here is just a little snippet of what we cover in our To the Top Study Club. And so everyone's going to get an email after this, and it's going to have a recording, and it's going to have a link to get one of these golden tickets. And I'd really encourage you to do it. You're going to show up. We always have guests and first timers, so you're not alone, and we're going to welcome you with open arms. And it's all you got to do is fly yourself to Milwaukee. It's free, but you're going to get a really great day of education, and you're going to think differently about your practice than you ever have. So I know it's kind of a big leap to like, I'm going to just go meet all these new people and jump in a thing, but do it. I promise you'll love it, and we'd love to have you.
Yeah. So let me show you exactly how it works. Now, you could do this too, but this is what we do. I'm going to pull back the curtains and show you exactly what we do and make good on these promises. Let's say you're the dentist that we're showing on the screen. You work 220 days a year. Your gross production is 1.3. In year one, you can't just switch everything. What you do is you make these small little adjustments. They're like little dials. We're just going to make an adjustment here. We're going to make an adjustment here. And what they do is they compound the returns elsewhere. But in doing so, you need to know what adjustments you're making. That's why this webinar is so important. So if you're the dentist, I'm just going to assume you're a 32-year-old dentist that we're working with. Young female dentist who's like, I'm working pretty hard. We would set a goal of like, you're working 220 days a year. That's too much. You got little kids. If that's who you are, let's go from 220 to 210. We're going to keep your production about the same, but we're going to tighten up the write-offs, maybe reduce them by about 3%. We're also going to do some work with Susie, get her using some good verbal skills, and you're going to see what we put into play in 12 months is going to improve this from 95% to 98%. And naturally, by watching your costs, your overhead's going to go down. As you can see here in this example, the amount you spend actually went up, but as a function of collections, the percentage went down. A little bit more went to your profit and loss statement, bottom line, gross profit. And I know things are tight at home, so you're taking out $10,000 a month. We're going to up your monthly draw. And oh, by the way, we got some money left. You start to feel a little confident. So let's set some new goals. So in year two, I got year 2 and 3 in here. Year 2, we're going to go to 200, and the year after that, 190. We're going to do the same process, and your gross production is going to stay in the same realm. Just like Barrett shared a little bit earlier, what we're going to do is get you to think a little bit better about your day. These aren't huge pivots that you're going to make in your practice. Again, incremental changes that make huge impacts. Now, one of the things I'll explain in the write-off thing is just by identifying patient segments, which is all of the data, like how many patients do I have that are out of network, maybe fee for service or uninsured. That's a segment. How many membership patients do I have? That's a segment. I got PPO A, B, C, D, E, F. We can start to identify which ones are the best fit for our practice. You're going to see PPO E or F. We don't make any money on it, and there's not that many patients on it. It becomes an easy decision because we have the data to say, let's not participate with that. It also gives you the confidence to take on some of the bigger ones. You're going to learn so much by looking at these numbers. And as a result, your write-offs are going to go down significantly. So as you're going to see, your net production as a function of the write-offs total is going to climb. We're going to go from 884 to 955 to over $1 million. We actually collected over $1 million, which is a big day for any dentist. And now we're at 1.1 hit the business bank account. So we're also going to keep working with Susie. Susie's getting really good at the, verbal skills. She's actually attended Miranda's admin workshop. She's been listening to some webinars. She's like learning how to do this, and she's gaining some confidence. As a result, your overhead went down a few more points. But again, I got to show this. I love this. This is one of my favorite. What you're spending or what you're expensing through your practice is actually increasing, relieving some of the pressure. Your dental accountant's like, man, this is going good. What hit your P&L statement? Now you're going to pay more taxes, so you got to plan for that. And your kids are getting a little bit older. Maybe you added one more child to the mix, and I need to take home a little bit more. And so these are draws that are going to go right to my bank account, whether you do them for payroll or whatever. And as you can see, things get better. Now let's go to the dream year and see what happens. And we're going to make good. In the final year, year number 4, maybe not final year, but we're going to go to 180. So as you can see, 220 to 180. We've improved what we do per day. We're a lot more focused. Our gross production didn't go up very much, but now we're getting really good at finding the patients that want to pay our full fee. Maybe we have one last PPO, and I just choose to keep that in the practice because it works, and I'm good with it. You can see my write-offs have dropped significantly. We've cut them almost in half. And for some reason, my net production has climbed without working any harder. As a matter of fact, I've been working less. My net collections went up. Susie's crushing it at the front. She's probably challenged me to raise my fees because she believes people should pay for dentistry. And now my overhead's 58%. I'm not buying cheap pens. I'm not buying cheap supplies. We've actually been purchasing high-quality stuff. I'm starting to think better. And now my gross profit has doubled. Now, here's the promise. As you can see in this illustration, and please take a screenshot of this if you'd like, so that you can go back and talk to your team or share this webinar. You can see we decreased the number of days by 18%. We went through from 18.3 days a month, remember, days worked per month, down to 15 days a month. That is a lot, my friends. That is 2 less days a month, more than 3 full days where you're not working. You're doing something fun. You're golfing or taking classes or fishing or something. Your gross production went up significantly. Well, not significantly. Let's say it grew less than 10%. So 1.3 to 1.4. So we don't have to really change the whole practice and chase this gross production thing. We became less PPO dependent, or became more PPO, less, just PPOs are less of the conversation as a result. We went from 33% to 15% write-offs. It's a good place to be because now I have a lot of confidence on where I want to go next. We cut our write-offs in half. They went from $435,000 to $216,000, a reduction of 50%. We improved our collections by over $300,000 just by sticking to the plan, just being steady and consistent. We also increased our expenses, what goes out as legitimate expenses, by over $100,000 a year. We're buying good supplies, giving raises. And our gross profit increased $278,000. Now, this isn't hocus pocus. This is simple math, incremental math, staying the course. I doubled what I put in my personal bank account because my family's growing. And I went from $120,000 draw a year to $240,000, still paying the taxes because I got to pay more taxes. And at the end of the year, we still had $100,000 left. So it poses good questions. What do we do next? So any questions or thoughts, Barrett, before we do our final takeaways in the chat?
I think Miranda might have some stuff for us.
Okay.
Hi, guys. There's just some questions that have popped in the chat. So is now a good time, or do you want to do your final takeaways and save all the Q&A for the end?
Let's do that. Miranda's so good. That's not really a question. That's a directive. So I like it. So Miranda's the best. She keeps us on the rails here because we could be talking for hours. So in our coaching program, just like Barrett shared, and our To the Top Study Club, we always have a gap scorecard. And please write this down if you're watching. What are you building? And what's your scorecard to tell us if we're on track or off track? This is like the CBCT for your business. We consider the gap scorecard the CBCT. It gives us images you can't see with the naked eye. and it allows for consistent and efficient tracking. And all of the other numbers that Barrett mentioned earlier, they can be linked to some of these major KPIs, and it can guide us with like what to do next. And if you can work with a company like Dental Intelligence, we love it because we get the data in real time. I can see what happened in your practice yesterday. It's like really sweet stuff. And we're grateful for that relationship. So I can stop sharing now. We can open it up for questions. And so Miranda, take it away.
So I was just going to share a couple of logistics first. I did put the CE information in the chat. So if you're looking for continuing education, start and end codes, they're in the chat. A couple of people asked as well about the recording. Yes, this is being recorded. And if you registered, you'll be receiving the recording in a follow-up email shortly, as well as it will live forever in the BPA. If you're not in there, get in there and you can find recordings like this one. Many of them exist. Also, a question was around getting a copy of the GAPS spreadsheet. Like you just shared, however, Kirk, that is exclusive to our To the Top Study Club and Pro Coaching clients. What I did, though, is I went ahead and put a link in the chat for our GAPS at a glance option, which is an abbreviated version of that spreadsheet to give people who maybe aren't a part of our community in that way an opportunity to see a snapshot of where your gaps and where some of this data may lie. So jump into the chat. You'll see the link there, as well as the link to the practice health score survey that you mentioned. So if anyone was interested in receiving that, it's also linked in the chat. And we do have a few questions. So one of the questions is, I'm busy. We hear this all the time. I'm busy. Who should own these numbers? So like this person's looking at the spreadsheet thinking like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of data. That probably takes a lot of time. So who should own these numbers and making sure that these numbers are on track and that we're able to report on them?
Yeah, can I go first on that one, Barrett?
Please.
So I love the question. So it's a great question. But one of the things I'll challenge you, because we're coaches, is ask a better question. Who's going to help us get to where we need to go? Because I've been in the shoes that you're at. Like, I just got to give this to somebody and get somebody tracking this. Well, that is true. But that person who's doing this needs to know why we're doing this and how can I support this process. So I think a better question is who's going to coach us up this mountain? And then I can ask a team member to do it. Because your team members, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. They're going to come to you in a month or two and go, what do we do with all this? Why does this matter? Like, where are we going with all this? As a coach, I can say things to you you can't say to your team members. As a coach, I don't work in your practice and it's not emotional. Now, I'm never going to say this in a negative way, but I'm going to say, listen, you guys have to see what happens beyond this. Now, it doesn't have to be us. I'm very biased, but you do need somebody that understands this to help you go to the next level. Barrett, Miranda, what would be your answer to who's going to track this data?
I would say that until the doctor and or leadership team fully understand how the gaps work and have worked through it themselves, then delegation I've never seen it work until the doctor has done the time and understands it and knows where to pull the numbers off the P&L. And I say that as a business owner, owned my own practice for 20 years. And we've heard this firsthand from dozens and dozens of clients who said, I learned so much about my business from having gone through that gaps and struggled through it and filling it out with my coach's help. And then they can delegate it and outsource it. But you learn so much about your business by pulling a profit and loss and pulling a cash flow statement and understanding the difference. It's worth it just to do that.
Yeah.
And I have to layer on to that, I agree fully. And in working with a lot of clients who gather this data on a monthly basis, what they do often elicit from their teams, typically an administrative team member, is their gross production, their adjustments, and the net production. So if that's something that you want to delegate something, you can delegate those numbers that, hey, once a month, admin team member Susie, can you help me out? I'd really like to get from you our gross production for last month, our adjustments broken up into these categories, and our net production. Everything from there forward, I agree fully that it really needs to be owned by the doctor, and even collections and that collections percentage being pulled from the P&L and not your practice management software. because that's the money that actually went into the bank is what's on your P&L. And there is often a discrepancy from what's posted in your software, which is something your team could pull, and what ends up in your bank, which is what's showing up on the P&L. So if anything, you could at least delegate out those first three numbers and then just plug those in from the data your team gives you. But from there on down, yeah, I mean, you got to learn and know. It's important information for you to know. And I think there's stuff in this that you probably wouldn't want to disclose to your team. So, yeah.
For sure.
We're ready for another question?
Yes, please.
Do
I
it.
know we're at 3:01, so just a reminder, anyone who had this book till 3 and you have a patient you have to go see, the CE code is in the chat. We're going to keep answering a couple of questions as we wrap things up. There's a question that says, how do you view days worked versus hours worked? In your opinion, is it more valuable to go from, say, 20 days, 140 hours to 20 days, 120 hours, or 18 days, same 120 hours? I assume there is some case by case basis there, but I'm curious.
Yeah, you guys go first. I'm very opinionated on this. So great question. Love the question.
I'll say this, it is case by case. And I would say, what do you want for your life first?
Yeah.
Then you back up to, okay, based on that, how many days what do my days look like? That helps you design, okay, is it a 6-hour day? Is it an 8-hour day? Is it a 7-hour day? Is it 7 to 3? Is it 8 to 5? Is there lunch? Is there no lunch? For the gaps, for the purpose of the gaps, we start with just how many days is your business open? Now, we know that many of you are going to dig deeper than that. Are going to say, yeah, but my Mondays are different than we get it. We got it. And I'd encourage you to think down that level. But just start with how many days is my business open, and then work from there. So yes, you could, you might know that your 16 days, 20 days a month means X amount of hours versus a different day, but that's your scenario. I personally like the idea of days away from the business, full days. I would rather work a couple hours longer and then have the outcome of that be a full day, but that's me.
Yeah. Miranda, you answer the question.
Well, I go back to our core purpose, which is better practice, better life. And exactly what Barrett said is better life means something different to every single doctor in our community. We have people who have a lot of external activities, maybe people who have families or kids. Maybe you don't want your child going to after school care. So you want to end your day every day by 3:00 and you'd rather work 4 days a week until 3. Some people might rather work 3 days a week until 7, right? Everybody's life is different. So to me, it's completely inherent upon what does your life look for, which is exactly what Barrett just mentioned, is it's just better practice, better life. And ultimately, it's all going to equate to the same thing, but you just have to make sure you're making those decisions based on what makes you feel like you're living your best life, you and your team.
Yeah. And I love your question. Please don't take this the wrong way. I love the question. Hours is not useful for me. It is if you do a drill down, but what happens in most case scenarios, and I know it's probably not the case for you, but I have people that go, I didn't work that day. I just, I had my assistant come in on a Friday. It was just 4 hours and we just prepped an upper arch. It was just me and her and the patient. That's a day's work. See, what people typically do is it's a justification. So they go, I'm going to add hours type of thing. I think if you drive to the office and you work with a patient, that's a day's worked. Now, that's my opinion, but what it does is it forces you to really think about the number of days. What you're talking about, Miranda, is absolutely true. I know for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I go to the office. It's not like to do something. I'm like locked in. I got to do so. I want to stay away from the office as much as possible. I want to teach the office to work without me being there. And I don't want to say to myself, we're short. We only work 15 days this month. I'm just going to see this patient on a Friday. I'm not going to go to the course with my study club, and we won't count that as a day. We're just going to add that production in. You start to justify all these things. And while that's legit, and it does happen, I want you to know the number better than anything. So that's my opinion. Doesn't make it right, so.
But it circles back to the equation. Right. Gross production times days worked. If your days worked is 5 hours, you're probably going to need more days worked than if your days worked had 8 hours, right? So there is some math to do. If you want to work shorter days, you might say, in order, I'm only going to work 6 hours because I want to do X, Y, and Z every afternoon. Okay, better life. Got it. Okay, in order to meet my financial targets. I need to produce X. Then therefore I have to work 182 days instead of 170. You might have to do that mathematic gymnastics, but you can see where that knowledge is so powerful instead of just kind of working, figuring it out, and then saying, "Oh shoot, I missed my targets."
Yeah.
Why did I miss my targets? Well, we got to produce more. Well, maybe, but maybe it's a day's worked hours. So the question's good because there's more layers to just a day worked.
I'm gonna layer it on a little bit more here. Are we good? We're good. Everybody's hanging in there. We still have 44 people hanging out with us.
Yeah.
So we're gonna
stay here. Hey, our commitment is
we're gonna stay here. My next 4 meetings. So good. Let's go.
All right. So here's a layered on question, which I love. And we get asked this quite often. So when you are starting to look at reducing days, say I want to get down from 200 to 180 days. Okay. That's 20 less days a year. The question is, are employees typically paid hourly or salary with this concept, right? Because if I'm working less days, then how am I going to compensate my team if we're not in the practice? So yeah, let's start there.
Ooh, good question. Barrett, you go first. Look at this.
Boy, this is a good one. I mean, this is
a great
2 hours. We're going to cancel the 5th meeting here. It's a great question, and there's no one answer.
Yeah.
And so if you're a single doctor and you're going to reduce 20 days, yeah, we've got to figure something out. There may be less income. Maybe we have to supplement it somehow else with added production and bonus structuring. Maybe there are, when I was out of the office, I allowed people to work, and I know that still technically would be an office day open. So there's lots of different ways to do this. Our point is that better practice, better life. If your life isn't, if you're holding yourself back from your better life because you feel bad about your team, it's valid and you have a good heart, but we got to close that gap somehow.
Yeah.
We've got to support your team in their better life while meeting your better life, because that's ultimately why you own a practice.
I have a few thoughts to tackle onto that. So I work with clients who have done this very same thing and have asked the same question. So here's some things that we've talked about is if you know you want to shorten your days, shorten the hours, or you want to work less days, you know what? Your team would love that too, as long as everybody's still making a solid income, right? We're still there to serve the purpose of receiving our pay in the end. And so if you're building your days to the production that you need, right? If you're currently working 8 to 6 and you say, I want to go 7 to 3, we're going to shorten things up a little bit. You can still build your schedule and build your days and build your practice to be just as profitable, if not more, in less time. And therefore, you can still pay your team the same that you've been paying them in the past. So just because you're reducing hours doesn't mean you have to reduce team pay. If you start working through some of the things that Barrett and Kirk talked about in this webinar, and we're reducing, say, our write-off percentage, we're going to have more true profit in the end. And so if we shave 4 hours off of our work week, now you can raise your team members' hourly rate. They're working 4 hours left, but you're going to raise their hourly rate to compensate that they're not making less money. And you can do that because you can still build your block schedule and build your practice by way of the profitability that you're not losing money by losing those hours or losing those days. And that's the big thing to remember, that in the end, a lot of times you're making more as a practice than you were making working more days when you start to build in these nuances within the gaps. And so then you're able to just modify the pay based on the amount of hours that you drop. So everyone's happy. In the end, your team is making the same amount of money, if not more. You're making the same amount of money, if not more, and you're getting more of your life back outside of the practice. And it's a win-win for everyone.
So well said. I'm going to
That was a great point.
Oh, so good point. So great question. Like, I love the question. Now, again, I'm a coach, so I'm going to challenge you. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you love your team? Just answer it honestly. And so if you love the people that you work with, your challenge as an entrepreneur is, how do I create a great place for them to be? Their compensation grows with less effort and less energy. That's my responsibility as an entrepreneur. I like to do stuff. I like to take courses. I'm leaving tonight. I like to go here. I like to go there. My lifestyle and how much I work cannot be tied to their income. They need the predictability of that income, and they need the safety and security of knowing that's always going to be there. So it leads itself to a bigger conversation. What Barrett and Miranda said is absolutely true. And this is where you have to think well. You first have to break the link between, if I'm going to work fewer hours, that means less pay for them. You can't do that. You're going to destroy your business. And what we've shown here is the beginning of the possibility. And so I like the idea of their income being predictable, whether it be salary or hourly, and finding a way that grows. Now, we showed you on this gap how you could allow for more money in overhead to do that. And you're going to see, if you work with a great coach, you're going to become more systems oriented. It's going to be less chaotic. You're going to have slower pace. People are going to laugh a little bit more. You're going to go away and they're going to go, we want you to go away. Can you go away again? Because there's no vacation like when your boss takes a vacation, knowing I'm still going to get paid while he or she is doing their thing. And now we're not tied to the chair. There's so many people that are talking about, I got to get out of the chair. I got to get out of here. I got to find a way. We're showing you one of the clearest ways that you can do that. I love your question. And there's so much opportunity in it. So I hope I said that.
On to the next. Okay,
Let's
we have
go.
one more. This one's pretty simple, I think. So question is, does the write-off percentage include adjustments by the doctors or only the write-offs related to insurances?
Kirk, you handle this one.
No, Miranda, you go first because I'm going to go all over the place on this one.
Okay, good point. Good point.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
point.
yeah.
Miranda, you
Okay, it's
handle
really
this one.
simple. When we're looking at the equation that Barrett and Kirk were sharing earlier, is yes, it includes all adjustments. So when we're looking at the spreadsheet that they had on the screen earlier, and when you're looking at the difference between your gross and your net in terms of that effort gap or write-off percentage, it's your insurance write-offs and adjustments. It's your membership plan courtesies, write-offs and adjustments, and as well your elective. So anything that falls within those non-voluntary doctor applied courtesies, senior citizen discounts, cash courtesies, warranty discounts, service and trade, anything that you're not collecting your full gross production for is going to be included in that effort gap or write-off percentage. What we see from most practices is that the bulk of that is comprised of the insurance write-offs. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and throw in the chat, since somebody was asking, our PPO roadmap. So sometimes then you're going to be saying, how can I start to look through some of the things you shared about how to reduce my PPO dependence, shrink that effort gap by way of the insurance adjustments? And so I'll just pop that in the chat now so that you can see how you could look into that roadmap in terms of how you can decrease some of your PPO dependence.
Yeah, can I piggyback right on that? And Barrett, and I want you to comment on the question because it's a great question. There's inherent challenges with your question. And so the inherent challenge is, number one, you have to bill your full fee all the time for everything. Nobody really does that. You think you do, but you don't. What's your master fee schedule? Even if you're 100% PPO and you charge $1,400 for a crown or $1,600, you should be billing that all the time for every patient. Now, let me go into the inherent challenge of that. Your sister was in last week. You prepped all of her uppers, and next week you're going to do all of her lowers. You didn't put it in the computer because she's your sister. You don't do that with family. You leave it out. So by that process, you're not putting any of your fees in, so you don't even know what your write-offs are. You're guessing. And so I like the idea of putting in your full fee every time, all the time, every time, even if you write it out, so it accounts for all of your time. I can do an accurate time analysis if you put every fee in for full. Now I can start to drill down. Most dentists don't put in their full fee, and then they don't put in family members or they just write NC. The dentist, if he's watching, I'm so sorry if I say, we went to an amazing dentist in Kansas City. I would bring the whole family there, and then he'd write NC on everything. No charge, no charge. We just had a bunch of stuff done. Like, you're not going to charge us for anything? Well, it was not accounted for. So I think that's a piece that needs to be considered. Barrett, you go.
I like when you said bill out everything all the time to everyone. If we think about it, we bill everyone as if they're a cash patient, 100. And then now we actually know our output. Remember, we said gross production is your output. You want to know how much product, how many widgets you made, and then write off everything you want. But for benchmarks, some of the best fee-for-service practices out there that write off the least are about, 7%, 5%. Once in a while, someone breaks 5%. You usually always have some write-offs. We want you to be charitable. We want you to do veneers on your sister. Do all that. Just write it off and account for it. So you're going to have write-offs. When you have one PPO, you're probably in the teens. When you have 2 or 3, you're probably in the 20 to 30. If you have 4, 5, 6 or more, you're 30% above, and that's hard profit margin wise. So a lot of times we find where someone's like, I got 5 insurances, but my write-offs are at 9%. We know that they're billing the insurance adjusted allowable fee and not their true fee. So there's a lot here, and this is what we do. We coach our clients through this. So if you're like, oh my God, my head's spinning, go into the PPO roadmap. We can help you. This is part of the process. Just the fact that you're thinking differently about how you build patients, I want you to just hold on to that and say, good, I understand my practice better than I did an hour and a half ago. And that's huge.
Love it.
All right, we're going to do one last question, and I think Kirk's going to want to take it away because this is right in your wheelhouse. But here's the last question. And just before I do, we did have a question from Lisa about what are the best ways, in our opinion, to compensate, appreciate, and retain a great team. That is an entire webinar. And great news, we have a webinar talking about just that on December 19th. I put the registration for that webinar in the chat.
Thank you, Lisa.
So we're going to, thank you. So we're going to jump into one last question from Nirvana. And so this layers back onto when we were talking about working less days, working less hours, compensating our team. So the question there is, how do you verbalize to patients that you don't work on, for example, Thursdays, or that you're only working 3 days a week? So when we were talking about reducing your working days, the question there is basically, how do you communicate that to patients? So Kirk, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for the question. It's so great. I like the idea, and I love for you guys. I would ask you to write this down. When the why is clear, the how's easy. So a lot of people start with like, how do I say this? Like, give me the perfect words. Well, the first thing you need to be equipped with is the why, which is what really matters to you. And nothing is better in a why than a photo. And I have a lot of them. Like, one of my favorites is just like a photo of your family or whatever's important to you. And I think a lot of these photos are in the worst places. They're in the doctor's office, or they're, somewhere else. They're on your phone. There's nothing better than putting a framed photo of whatever's important to you, whether it be your kids. If you have little ones, you can point to those little faces and you can go, I don't work on Saturdays or, Sundays. That's why. Like, that's my reason why. That's my whole why. That's why I do what I do. And people will get that. And I'll go one layer higher than that, or just kind of the simple things. You have to practice this. And a lot of times we get an office or a dental practice, they're working evenings. And I'm like, do you really? And they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And they're like, well, how do I tell patients? Because all of them are teachers and they're not going to come back, and people need evening hours. I'm like, people don't need evening hours. And they're stuck in this self-limiting belief. But they put the photo on the counter the first time, and they're like, we just start pointing at the photo, telling our patients we're going to be changing our hours. And that's a reason why people will get it. Everyone will get it. If they don't get it, I wonder if that's a patient I want to see in a day that I wouldn't normally work. Because people will lean into that. They'll go, this is such a great practice. I got a story about a dentist. I won't tell you where he's from. So we coached a dentist many years ago. He's like, I love that. He changed his whole practice, changed everything. But he doesn't have any kids. He's like, Kirk, that doesn't work for me. I don't have any kids. I go, do your team members have kids? He's like, oh, a lot of them. So he rounded up all of his team members and his team members' kids. They took a photo on the front steps of the practice and they sent it to everybody saying, we will no longer be working evenings and Saturdays. And this is the reason why. People loved it. I still think they have it. And I still think he doesn't have any kids. So it's like an amazing visual representation of family matters type of a thing. So I don't know that you need to get really wordy. And one last thing I would say this, because this is my wheelhouse, is you don't often have to explain yourself when you pick a direction. When you pick a direction, you go, this is where we're going and this is why. You're going to find most people will follow you and you don't have to justify it. Your team members are going to do a better job of explaining it than you will. And you can go, they said that to you? That's so awesome. What else would you guys add?
Everything you said, and the patients that complain are the ones that probably aren't right for your practice anyway.
Right.
Anybody that I know who's been through this, including myself, we used to work late days, 1 day a week until like 7 p.m. And we thought, all the team was like, we're so done with these late days. And we finally agreed, that the doctors agreed, let's switch it up. We're not going to have late days anymore. And we thought, but what are all these people going to do that like coming in at 4, 5, and 6 o'clock? And we're not going to have that as an option anymore. There's like a handful of people who gripe and groan one time in one conversation. You explain to them what's going on, they move on with their lives, and they schedule at 7 a.m. for their next visit. So it's never as big of a deal as we storytell ourselves that it's going to be.
Speaking of stories, can I tell one story? I tell this story a lot. John O'Bowder, shout out to you. Great dentist that we coach. He said, I can't change my hours. I got teachers in my practice. I think teachers and military should go first for everything. Those are the two pools of great heroes in the world that don't get enough credit for everything that they do. And so data removes all emotion, like we shared. So John will pull the report. He's like, I got teachers in my practice. Guess how many teachers he had? He had 11. He thought he had 100, but he had 11. There are days that you work and teachers don't. True? So they called proactively all those teachers, and they said these are teacher VIP days. They pre-scheduled days for those people and said, let's take care of them first. Thus removing the self-imposed limitation that we have to stay open in the evening for all these teachers. Now he has more what in his practice? Teachers! And he loves serving that patient base. So it's so great because we get these stories. This is all we do. We do this all day long. We get great stories from great people. And I love your questions. Keep going. Barrett, anything you would add?
No, you guys hammered that one. That was perfect.
Look at Barrett. Barrett's like, wow, this is a long webinar. We're...
Well, that was our last question.
I know. We love this stuff.
Wrap it up. Tell everybody how much you love them and how glad you are that they were here today.
All right. So I love all of you that showed up. Thank you guys for showing up. We love this stuff. We love dentistry. Dentistry is an amazing, noble profession. We're going to keep bringing it. Real facts, real research, real data, real frameworks you can use to create a better practice, a better life. We have an amazing agenda ahead of us. We've got an amazing curriculum ahead of us. If you have a team that needs support, whether it be a hygienist, assistant, admin team member, bring them to the BPA. I was thinking PPO. I'm throwing all. We're gonna support you every step of the way so that you guys go to work and love it, enjoy it every single day, that much more. So keep showing up. We're going to keep bringing it. Anything you guys would say before we say goodbye?
I'm just going to say this because I just put it in the chat. A couple of people were having issues with a couple of the links. Just email us at info@actdental.com and I will make sure you get what you need.
Awesome. Thank you guys for doing this. Miranda, thanks for keeping us on the rails. Thank you for creating all this great content. Barrett, thanks for being the co-host.
Always.
We'll try to hit the mark. We'll try to hit the mark next time. And
3 hours next time. Let's do it.
Never ever plan a meeting after a webinar.
It's awesome. Well, you guys enjoy your day, and we will see you soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.